Hello again, Struck. Today I'm bringing you another guide video for Dungeons & Dragons Dark Alliance, and this one would be about status effects. So we will be talking about what buffs, debuffs and conditions are, and what each of them does, or at least the ones that I could find any information about. So let's start by quickly making an introduction. State effects in Dark Alliance are positive or negative effects that can benefit or hinder any character in combat for a specific amount of time. Status effects can be triggered by various things such as enemy attacks, enemy abilities, player combo moves, player abilities, equipment stats, equipment set bonuses, environmental hazards, and more. Status effects are separated into three categories: buffs, debuffs, and conditions. Every status effect has its own symbol that appears near an enemy's HP bar when it's affected, or on your HUD, meaning on your interface, the screen, when your character is affected by it. Now let's move on to buffs first. In Dark Alliance, just like in any other RPG game, buffs are positive effects that boost your stats or benefit you in other ways during combat. Some of those can come from consumables, like for example the elixirs of physical and elemental resistance, which boost your physical and elemental resistances. Others could come as stats rolled on a piece of equipment, and some could come even from the set's bonuses at 3, 5 or 8 pieces equipped. There are many full lists, but the full list in a moment. And just to name a few things you can get is like increased strength, boost all your specific or specific type of elemental resistances, boost to your crit chance or crit damage, health regeneration, etc. Some of those buffs you can apply to yourself or your allies after using a certain ability or a combo move, so look out for those and try to stack the buffs during combat. For example, Catti-Brie has a melee combo attack that when executed applies precision strikes, which increases your crit damage, and that can be combined with Heartseeker Volley's ability that increases precision, that gives you precision strikes as well. Not sure if you can stack them, but you can at least use one and then the other and rotate them. And you can even, to top it off, you can use your ultimate, which applies legendary resistance for you and your allies, so you can stack all sorts of different buffs. And keep in mind, all classes' ultimates can apply some sort of defensive or offensive buffs that benefit the whole team, or just your hero, or both. So make sure to use those wisely. I personally try to always get closer to my teammates when using Catti-Brie before ulting, so that they can buff too. Now let's start talking about those buffs. Acid damage, for example, grants your attacks and abilities additional flat acid damage, so like plus 100, 200, etc. flat damage. Acid immunity prevents all incoming acid damage from enemy attack skills or abilities, as well as from environmental hazards. Acid resistance reduces the acid damage taken from enemy attacks, skills or abilities, as well as from environmental hazards. Cold damage grants your attacks and abilities additional flat cold damage, for example 100, 200. Cold immunity prevents all incoming cold damage from enemy attack, skills or abilities, as well as environmental hazards. Cold resistance reduces the cold damage taken from enemy attack, skills or abilities and hazards. Concentration is something I'm not sure about, but it's either casting speed or casting cannot be interrupted. This is what it normally does in games. Elemental resistance reduces all elemental damage taken from enemy attack, skills, abilities and environmental hazards. Fire damage grants you flat fire damage to your attacks and abilities. Fire immunity prevents all incoming fire damage from attacks, abilities and environments. Fire resistance reduces the fire damage taken from enemy attack, skills, abilities or hazards. Frenzy increases all damage done, and I'm not sure if it's just the physical or if it increases the elemental damage as well. Invulnerable, this prevents taking any incoming damage, makes you invulnerable. pretty self-explanatory. Legendary resistance, this one I'm not sure. Some people, I managed to find information where they say it reduces legendary damage, but that makes totally no sense. So my guess is this grants a solid amount of physical and elemental resistances combined. That's what I think it is. Then lightning damage grants your attacks and abilities additional what? Lightning damage. Lightning immunity prevents all incoming lightning damage from enemy attacks, skills, abilities, and environmental hazards. Lightning resistance reduces the lightning damage taken from enemy attacks, skills, abilities, as well as from environmental hazards. Necrotic damage gives your attacks and abilities additional necrotic flat damage. Necrotic immunity prevents all incoming necrotic damage from enemy attack, skills, or abilities, as well as environmental hazards. Necrotic resistance reduces the necrotic damage taken from enemy attack, skills, or abilities, as well as from environmental hazards. Physical resistance reduces the physical damage taken from enemy attack, skills, or abilities, as well as from environmental hazards. Powerful strikes gives you increased critical damage, and precision strikes increases your critical chance. Primal Instinct grants you bonus damage and armor based on how much of your HP is missing. Reckless Attack is something I'm also not sure about. My guess is that it grants you increased damage but also makes you take more damage. That's what I could find in some E4, E5 D&D guides, D&D information. Then Regeneration grants you a healing over time effect, or HOT as it's abbreviated. Shielded prevents any stuns and knockdowns, but keep in mind any damage received will be dealt to your shield bar instead of your HP bar, so it gives you just a shield, a mana shield, or whatever you want to call it. Stalwart grants you a temporary strength bonus. Thorns, this one either makes it so that enemies that hit you take damage when they do so, or that nearby enemies take damage without hitting you. In most games, enemies have to hit you to take damage from thorns. In some games there's a mechanic that makes it so that they can take damage even without needing to hit you. I'm not sure how it works in this game, still haven't experimented with it. Then there's Unstoppable, prevents any stuns and knockdowns, but you will still receive any incoming damage. Vampiric grants a wife steal to your attacks / abilities, meaning you heal as you do damage. And that's it for the buffs. Now we're moving on to the debuffs. In Dark Alliance, just like in many other ARPG games, debuffs are negative effects that lower your stats or hinder your combat prowess in other ways. Most of the debuffs you encounter in Dark Alliance will be inflicted by either an enemy's skill, ability, or attack, or by some sort of environmental hazard. There are many of those, but the full list in a moment. Just to name a few, you can, for example, get things such as taking various types of damage over time effects from the different elements, being unable to use abilities for a short duration, or things that make you take more damage or slowing your movement speed. Now let's start again in alphabetical order. Bleeding inflicts physical / bleeding damage over time. I'm not sure if it's considered physical or bleeding is a sort of element, but I think it's the damage over time of physical. Burning inflicts fire damage over time. Charmed makes you unable to attack, but you can still move. Corrupted, this is something I'm not sure. I tried looking it up, and the corruption mechanic in D&D tabletop is completely weird, so I don't think it can apply in this game. Something that I can guess here, it could reduce all your resistances, but that's just probably not true. Then Cursed increases all damage you take by 50%. Fatigued slows the combat speed and animation to those affected. Frightened makes you unable to move. Hexed inflicts necrotic damage over time. Poisoned inflicts poison damage over time. Sapped. Here I'm not sure, but judging by the icon and how that lightning bolt was used anywhere else where stamina was used, most likely this drains your stamina. Silence, temporarily unable to use any abilities. Sword reduces your movement speed, and Weakened reduces all damage you do, which sums up the debuffs. And now we're moving to something very interesting called conditions. And conditions are a special kind of status effect that's kind of different than debuffs, and they cannot be countered by any potions, elixirs, equipment, stats, etc. Some are positive and can be caused by player skills or abilities, while others are caused by the special abilities which some enemies use. For example, Ice Winds, Ice Breath can freeze you. Some are even caused by AoE hazards on the ground, like those frozen, spiky ground places where if you step on them you will get damaged if you don't have the warmth, which is another condition. And they work in combination with the debuffs. And some of those can be super annoying, like for example Confuse that inverts your movement and camera controls. So pay attention to your surroundings and make sure to always get that warmth buff, for example from those giant burning swords stuck in the ground, before stepping on those spikes of frozen ground. Now, blinded. Your attacks will miss. Confused, your character's movement and camera movement are inverted, one of the most annoying conditions as I mentioned. Ethereal, here I'm not sure, but usually this either makes you able to phase walk past through enemies without collision, or sometimes it makes you dodge spells, avoid spells. So one of those two is my guess, but just don't take my word for it. Exhausted, as I mentioned, lightning bolt, stamina, so your stamina has been fully depleted, that's when you get exhausted, and for a little while until the stamina regeneration triggers you would be unable to move. Frozen. This freezes you and renders your character unable to move. You have to press a button rapidly, on PC for me it's E, to break free, or in the case of Frozen, allies can hit you to remove this effect. This brings us to Grappled, where you are caught in a trap, which normally is laid by an enemy on the ground. And this also renders your character unable to move, and you also have to press a button rapidly to break, again the same one as in Frozen. I'm not sure if an ally hitting you while you're grappled would help you get out of it. Invisible. Enemies cannot see you, but this doesn't seem to properly work from what I've seen, or at least didn't used to. Now, Taunted increases your threat level towards affected targets, which means it increases your aggro, which makes enemies attack you. Warmth prevents all incoming cold damage from environmental hazards, like that spiky frozen ground. I don't think this would prevent cold damage from skills and stuff. I think it's just for hazards. And this concludes my buffs and debuffs and conditions in Dark Alliance guide, the status effects guide. I'll be making more guides eventually and builds in the incoming days and weeks, so you can stay tuned for those. To get notified when I upload more content for this game or other games like this one, which would be wooters of all varieties, isometric, third-person ARPGs, wooter shooters and all sorts of wooters like that, you could subscribe to my channel and hit that bell button to not miss out on my content updates. And optionally, you can even join as a member of the Struck Club on YouTube as a channel member to get access to exclusive perks such as special emotes custom made by me, special badges custom made by me that represents how many months you have been a member for, as well as opt-in of editing tutorials that I can give for Photoshop, Adobe Premiere, as well as shoutouts and things like that. And I would like to use this part of the video to thank all my YouTube members and Twitch subscribers. Thank you for supporting the channel and keeping me going. Thank you also for watching this video, everyone. Keep it cool, Struck Club. Until next time, and goodbye.